Hey guys, Rob here. Growing up, I absolutely loved Sly Cooper. More so than Ratchet and Clank or Jak and Daxter. Sly Cooper was up there with Dragon Ball Z in terms of pure obsession, and that is saying something. However, in 2025, it would appear that this love for Sly Cooper is a love held in vain. In all likelihood, Sly is never coming back from ancient Egypt. By the way, if you haven't already, remember to subscribe and potentially like the video. I don't think this video is going to get too many likes given its rather pessimistic topic, so any likes at all would help here. The most recent mainline entry into the Sly Cooper series, Sly 4 Thieves in Time, was released all the way back in early February 2013. This means that the time between Sly 4 and now is around 4 years longer than the time between Sly 3 and 4. For a lot of us who grew up playing Sly, this is a stark reminder of how much more quickly time passes as we get older. It also means that a lot more of the casual fans who played Sly Cooper as a child are far less interested in the series now. They've got jobs to pay and bills to work, and where a healthier portion of the fan base had grown from child to teenager between Sly 3 and 4, that same portion of the fan base is now in their 20s and older Sly fans are in their 30s. Unfortunately, it seems that a lot of people who would have been interested in Sly's continuation have moved on. Sly 4 received an initially positive but later mixed reaction from fans. The change from Sucker Punch Productions to Sanzaru Games led to increased scrutiny by Sly Cooper fans, who were quick to point out areas that Sanzaru had somewhat dropped the ball. Whether this was the change to Sly's character.
How does this sound for a stage name? The Amazing Cooperone! Huh? Right? It's good.
The very quick way that the game had dealt with the fake amnesia plot that we had been left with for 8 years, or the seemingly random and heartbreaking Penelope heel turn, or the fact that Dimitri doesn't have a single line of f***ing dialogue in the entire game. There was plenty to criticise, especially with the change of developers, and the 2010s was also the time that the YouTube essay criticism of games and other media became an extremely popular type of content. This doesn't bode well for the strength of a fanbase, when a large percentage has simply grown up and forgotten about Sly, and a lot of the ones who are still left behind have been insanely critical of the most recent release. The message has been somewhat sent that apart from an increasingly small and critical cult following, Sly Cooper simply doesn't have enough fans to turn a profit. Whilst a lot of fans take the optimistic view that Sony may be interested in Sly 5 as a sort of passion project, there's not much room for that when it comes to major gaming companies who rely on their profit margins to keep afloat. Sucker Punch has completely moved on from Sly. Where Sly 2, the most popular game in the series, sold around 1.2 million units, Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima, released in 2020, has sold around 13 million copies worldwide. I can see why Sly Cooper is no longer something they think about getting back into. As for Sanzaru, they also have had better selling projects, such as around 1 million units for Asgard's Wrath, as opposed to Sly 4, which sold around 600,000 units. Keep in mind that Asgard's Wrath was a VR game, which is actually a far more niche market than what Sly 4 was released to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying VR games aren't popular, but it would be harder to find somebody who owns a VR headset than it was to find somebody who owned a PlayStation 3 in 2013. For a lot of the fanbase, the original Sly Trilogy's re-release in late 2024 gave them something of a glimmer of hope. The fans mobilised around the game, and there was 7,000 reviews on the PSN store for Sly 1. This led to a 4.6 star rating, and it was briefly a bestseller on the store. This led to quite a few people who've never played the series giving it a go. However, this is nothing to write home about in reality. Ghost of Tsushima received the same star rating with over 248,000 ratings on the PlayStation Store. Granted, Sly was a re-release, and you can expect lower numbers for a re-release, but also, the entire fanbase was rallied around giving this re-release a rating. I remember posts on X and Facebook and YouTube videos dedicated to the entire fanbase of Sly Cooper pushing for everyone to send a message to Sony that we wanted more Sly. And whilst we tried, there just wasn't enough of us to send any sort of real message. Even the Spyro Reignited series, which also sold physical copies, saw 20,000 reviews on PSN to give it a similar star rating to Sly, and they didn't even have to rally their entire fanbase in such a way. We fired our best shot. But it wasn't enough. Sucker Punch has no interest other than the odd Easter egg and reference in their video games for sentimentality's sake, and Sanzaru has been acquired by Oculus and has completely shifted focus to VR games. I don't think any of us want a Sly 5 as a VR game. We were also promised other media from the Sly franchise. We all remember the movie trailer that was going to be a TV show. The status of both has not been updated since 2017. We have officially been ghosted. The cost of re-releasing original games on the PlayStation Store is somewhat minimal and can offer a bit of profit for very little investment. This is why we got the re-releases when we did. Nostalgia, and for the casual fan to say, oh wow, I played that when I was a kid, and nothing more. There is a small chance that indie game developers may take on the project as a passion project, but Sony would be very protective over their intellectual property, and this would be a massive undertaking for something that wouldn't make any money, and also might end up with a lawsuit if pursued. There's also a lack of ROM hacks and fan content that you would expect to see if there was any chance of a homemade Sly 5. For Dragon Ball Z, you have versions of some of the games that include fanfiction content, or Budokai Tenkaichi 4 that includes the newer stories, and for Pokemon, you have a plethora of ROM hacks due to the relative ease of taking on such an endeavour. For Sly, this is ultimately pointless. Not only are the games themselves hard to modify in such a way, but Sly Cooper games are also notoriously difficult to emulate on most devices, and there'd be no money in it, and it would probably receive barely any downloads. This is before we even get to mentioning the plot of Sly 4 and how it's almost completely written any would-be developers into a corner. Sly has ended up in ancient Egypt during his time-bending battle with Le Paradox, and the intention, as far as I remember, was for there to be a DLC that followed and explored the story of ancient Egypt for Sly. For a lot of us, in lieu of receiving any such DLC, our headcanon is that Sly becomes Slyton Carmen, his own ancient Egyptian ancestor. However, this wouldn't make any sense given that Sly is depicted in Sly 4 as having a prehistoric ancestor in the Ice Age around 10,000 BC, so that doesn't work. In a way, it was the concept of time travel itself that made the Sly Cooper series die. Often, a telltale sign of a series jumping the shark is a plot involving time travel. It's also a hard sell to have a game series that says, come be a stealthy ninja-like thief in different time periods, because I don't know if you've heard, but there is a different game that lets you do exactly that. In many ways, Sly Cooper walked so that Assassin's Creed could run, and for a lot of the fan base, Sly Cooper is seen as a precursor to the Assassin's Creed franchise, with the idea of its stealth-based gameplay and a strong link to ancestors from previous eras. It's a shame. This is all a grim reality that, to be honest, I wish those of us left didn't have to face. I truly believe that the original 3 games are underrated genius. The franchise was never given as much love as Ratchet & Clank or Jak and Daxter, and unfortunately, the franchise arrived on the scene at the time where animal mascot-based video games were in a steady decline. Everything has worked against Sly and the gang, and this essentially means that it's over. Sly Cooper is dead. Except for one thing. And one thing only. Something that is already being used to generate some Sly Cooper content. You already know what I'm going to say. It's AI. There is a chance that artificial intelligence will be used in the future to develop a Sly Cooper game. In all likelihood, we are still far away from this being a viable option, but it feels like we've said that for the past 2 to 3 years of artificial intelligence, and changes and developments have happened at an increasingly fast rate during that time. The reason I think this is possible is that we will eventually get to a place where AI can write the code for video games. I believe there's already been some developments in that area, and it's starting where you'd expect it to start, text-based RPGs and the like. However, it is somewhat a matter of time before the AI can generate much more ambitious projects. This removes a lot of the disincentivizing factors for a fan-made version of Sly Cooper 5 being released, such as how time-consuming the endeavour would be through traditional means. There's a lot of problems with this at the moment, as any glitch in the game would require somebody to go and modify the AI-generated code. But it's far more likely that this is how we will get some sort of continuation of Sly's journey rather than any official release. Whilst this in all likelihood would mean a trade-off in quality and won't result in an official release you can play on any mainline console, it would be something, and it is in fact the only thing that any of us at this point can hope for. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a comment on how likely you think it is that there will ever be an AI Sly Cooper 5. Does the prospect of an AI-generated Sly Cooper game give you any hope at all? Is this fanbase even still out there in any sort of meaningful quantity in 2025? Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.